Welcome to Grit in Action. And our first guest is a very important man, Mr. Michael Wheatley, Major, Australian Army retired, who's a great friend of mine. And we have a lot of laughs together. But Michael's got a very interesting story from his time growing up in the Solomon Islands post-war. His parents had been through the Second World War. And then at the age of 8, coming to a very strange place called Toowoomba in Queensland, Australia. So welcome to the show, Michael, and thanks for coming along and agreeing to have a chat with me.
Thanks, Mark.
So tell me about growing up in the Solomons. What was it like back then?
Well, it was post-war. I grew up. I was born in a town called Gizo in the Western Province of the Solomon Islands, which is the main government administrative centre. Although we actually came from a place called Munda.
Yeah.
In what was, I guess, it's an area called Roviana.
Yeah.
Which is renowned in its day for headhunters and cannibalism.
Yep.
My grandfather, Norman Wheatley, was an Englishman. He was one of a couple of the earliest settlers, and he had quite a lot of property there.
Oh yeah.
He had it's quite an interesting story of how he got to be there. At age 15, he's alleged to have assaulted his foreman in a foundry.
Okay.
With an iron bar.
As you do.
And legged it ahead of the constabulary and stowed away on a ship. And spent several years. Yeah. We believe in the Far East.
Okay.
And ended up in the Solomons. But I've tracked him down in the records.
Yeah.
And I can identify him as a 21-year-old able-bodied seaman.
Oh, right,
disembarking from a trading voyage to the Solomons.
So he came out, he did a roundabout trip, he got to the Solomons, and then there's an Irish connection as well, which is probably of interest to me with my background.
My mother is descended from an Irishman called Lorne Campbell McMahon.
Okay.
Who we knew came from Brisbane. He was there working for a company called Burns Philp, who had quite a lot of properties and business interests throughout the Pacific.
They're famous for the spices and all that sort of thing.
In the 30s, about 1932, I think it was, he was killed by the natives, as they would have said in those days, on his little trading vessel.
Okay.
He'd married a local woman.
Okay.
Who and from that marriage came my mother.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing is that the woman he married is the mother, is the daughter of my grandfather's first wife.
Oh gosh, my goodness!
She'd left him after had several children.
Oh yeah.
I come down from the second marriage.
Okay.
And so that's both my parents are mixed race. One of English extraction, and the other of Irish extraction.
Obviously, the Irish was the better.
I've checked it on. I have a deep history in family history, and I've traced them all. Yeah. And including a DNA test, and I've probably got more Celtic.
Yes.
Inside me.
I've seen pictures of you wearing a kilt. Actually, it's quite remarkable. Apparently, you got permission to wear it on St. Patrick's Day, a saffron Irish kilt.
Yes, that was as the pipe major of the pipes and drums of the 2nd 4th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. I was allowed to wear the kilt on one day of the year. Yeah. St. Patrick's Day, because the battalion had a regimental affiliation with the Irish Guards. Okay. Which is they wear the saffron.
Now there you go. Yeah. Fascinating. I'm just trying to picture you in a kilt, but I have seen the photo. I thought you looked pretty
But
dashing.
Back to the original question of how it was like growing up. We grew up on an island just off the mainland, and it was very exciting. It was post-war, so there was a lot. Munda was the scene of quite a large battle. It was in fact the second battle after Guadalcanal, which was Operation Watchtower. And the Munda was Operation Toenails, the second leap towards Rabaul.
So this would have been the Americans versus the Japanese, and your mother and father
were involved.
They lived through the whole thing.
My mother lived in the jungle for 2 years.
Wow.
My father was a doctor. He had trained in Fiji, But he was in the Eastern Province looking after the Asian. There was an Asian camp run by the British. The British administration had fled to Sydney.
Okay.
But they left behind a network of coast watchers and still maintained British. My mother tells me the British discipline was still maintained through the jungle.
Yes.
Through the network of that people, that traders, ex-traders who became coast watchers.
Well, they played a massive role in the Pacific War, the naval engagements. So your father was sort of behind enemy lines.
No, he was. Sorry, my mother was.
Yeah.
Certainly, because the war had passed her.
Yeah.
Onto Munda, and they used to support the coast watching network.
Yeah.
My father was on the other side of Guadalcanal. The war didn't quite reach that far, I don't believe.
Ah, okay.
So basically Kira.
Yeah.
But it was very, very close. So I guess it was similar to here after the war in England, probably, where from my reading, where things were very scarce.
Yeah.
Even in the late 50s, meat rationing in England and Australia. Michelle, in Toowoomba growing up, they weren't. Manufacturing had not swung back to.
And Michelle is your wife, just.
Sorry?
You mentioned Michelle, that's your good wife?
My wife, yes.
Yes. And going back to just on Michelle there, you knew Michelle from a very early age, didn't you?
Since I first came to Australia when I was 8 years old.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite amazing.
And it's on the ancestry side of it, it's quite amazing. I discovered her Irish forebears came to Warwick, for example.
Yeah.
In 1857. And they would have known my other forebears who were Scottish.
It's amazing, isn't it?
They also settled in the Warwick.
How the lines communicate.
Talk about 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah. You told me that your mother was behind the lines and, was aware of the atrocities of the Japanese invading forces and would come along a beach and there'd be, tens and tens of unfortunate sailors who'd been washed up from having drowned or being killed from naval engagements.
Yes, they were part of the network with the coast watchers, and they'd be taught to watch. They would help report the aircraft.
Okay.
Going past, and if there were naval engagements, Bella northern side sort of is on the southern side of what they call the slot.
Okay.
Where the rat runs would come down towards Guadalcanal from Rabaul. And also aerial dogfights, parachutes would come down. She would talk about seeing that. And then they would try and sometimes they'd go there to collect the debris, like soap or cheese.
Yeah. Whatever they could get.
And sometimes there would be obviously bodies from either side that were there, so they would do what they can for those. Sometimes help with the wounded airmen that they recovered. Yeah. She was 16 and had trained with the missionary nurses in the hospital.
Okay.
And she does tell her the story of where one New Zealand airman that she helped carry or cared for. He was wounded, and she cared for him until they got to the submarine, because what would happen, a PT boat might come and pick them up, or a Catalina.
Okay.
Once they got the word to the coast watcher to have an RV and pick up the Allied airmen. But in late 70s, I think, early 80s, she was on the ferry from Gizo to Munda.
Okay.
And this elderly gentleman was looking at her.
Yes.
So she was very embarrassed about this because she was a widow, a respectable widow.
Yes. Yes.
And it turned out he was the same airman that she had nursed.
Wow. Isn't that amazing?
There was a period of time there with quite a few people, Americans as well.
Yes.
Would go back to the places where they'd fought in.
Yeah, wow.
That happened around the world, I guess, but she ran.
So she played an active part in the resistance to Japanese occupation. That's what I'm reading.
Not in a direct sense, I guess, but they just had to keep running away.
Yeah.
Stay out of the road.
Yeah, and provide support.
Report and provide.
It was critical to the success of the whole thing. So there you are, growing up in the Solomons, lots of, I'm assuming, fishing and water and stuff like that.
Oh, it was very, very exciting.
Yeah.
I've reflected on it many years later, and then really we were very close to the environment.
Yeah.
Perhaps like a farmer is here.
Yes.
Very much living on an island, few resources. Fishing was your main. You had to find your own food.
Yeah.
It was all fun to me. It was exciting. You'd go fishing with your dad, or you'd go to the gardens, the food gardens, or the reef, collecting with your mother, which is what women do. They're collecting food the whole time.
Right.
But we thought it was fun.
Yeah. So then we get to the point where maybe the education facilities were limited in your area, and your parents decided that they were going to send you to Australia.
Yes.
At the age of 8, and they chose Toowoomba. Why did they choose Toowoomba? What was the connection there?
I asked my dad that. He said there was a Chinese trader that he knew, from there, quite a few Chinese around then.
Yeah.
Some brought by my grandfather to work on his ships, help shipbuilders. But he'd sent his son to a school in Toowoomba.
Oh, right.
Called Frenno Park. And so Dad, I guess he liked the idea of the Catholic nuns, because he felt they used to look after, his own words to me, I remember, this is why he felt like the nuns were more likely to look after the children.
Okay.
That was his opinion. And he was used to, from his grandfather's day, that's how any traders or planters, similar to farmers here, would have to send their school from Fiji, would come to boarding schools in Australia or New Zealand, and it was not an uncommon thing for those who had the means. And Dad in those days did have a bit of money, with prices were good for copra.
Okay.
And which is a byproduct of the coconut plantations.
Okay.
So he was able to afford for a little while.
Yeah.
To send me to school here in Toowoomba.
So how did you get here? Like, did you jump on a boat, or 2 boats, 3 boats, and a plane? Don't suppose you swam.
I don't know how to describe that. It was by TAA, Trans-Australia Airlines, as it was then.
Yeah.
It was a DC-3 aircraft from Munda, Bourne, Rabaul, overnight in Lae at a rest house. I think I had one set of clothes. I wasn't terrified, because I was fairly independent by then. I was fairly used to living hard, like in canoes or boats. Hardship and privation was nothing. Going without food or being cold and hungry was not. Yeah. Fishing was a matter of pride.
And you'd go out in the canoe on your own at that stage when they'd let you go off. That was part of learning how to cope.
Yeah, everybody just did it.
I guess the thing is, and this the whole idea of these videos and this podcast, is it's to try and look at the concept of grit and resilience. Yeah. Like, I don't know how I'd have gone at the age of 8, going to an old strange country in 4 plane hops. It's pretty full on for an 8-year-old, and wondering where you're going. So obviously you had a sense of adventure.
Oh yeah. What I remember that from that trip, the two lots of people, and it speaks for the goodness of people, the goodness of strangers.
Yeah.
There were a couple of brothers, Catholic brothers, who were travelling.
Yeah.
Not brothers as in siblings, but as in the laity.
Yeah.
They helped me along.
Yeah.
And the air hostess.
Okay.
Air hostesses, the 2 in particular, I wouldn't know their names, but the rest house I stayed in in Lae was the TAA rest house, airline rest house. So they made sure, just like airlines look after children, I guess.
Yeah.
That if you sent your young child minor,
they
would look after them.
No, it's good.
And people help you filling out the cards, because I couldn't really read or write at that stage.
Oh, right.
Fill out the forms.
Yeah.
And I got to next day on Port Moresby, Townsville, Brisbane, where I got lost in the airport.
Oh no. It wouldn't have been probably a huge airport by then anyway, but it's big enough.
It was a Quonset hut. The Brisbane International Airport used to be a Quonset hut in those days.
Really? Is that one of those curved?
Yeah.
Really?
So I had to sit. So somehow I got separated from the bunch, and the people waiting for me outside were arranged. It was the parents of one of the students who lived in Brisbane was going to pick me up, but I never turned up. And my sister was there too because she was at All Hallows.
Oh, right down in Brisbane.
Yes,
Yeah.
an elder sister. She was there on a scholarship.
Wow.
And I didn't. People kept coming out, but no Michael. And eventually this somebody must have come over and said, I remember I was by myself by that stage.
Yeah.
I must have just stood there going,
where do I go now? Yeah.
and somebody got me, and one of the staff must have been, took me up through and out, and they said, where have you been?
I was in here waiting for you.
inside.
Oh, it's these things happen. That's quite remarkable. So you came to school in Toowoomba and you went to a school that is no longer there, but it's opposite the was opposite the racecourse in Toowoomba.
Yes, it's the remnants of it is what's called Frenno pines.
Okay.
The pines trees were there in my day, but it wasn't part of the school. It was a farm.
Okay.
They went all the way down Hursley Road from where the pines are, I think across to Greenwattle, and there's a school, a boarding school for young boys run by Our Ladies of the Sacred Heart nuns.
Right.
It's probably the equivalent of prep Church of England.
And your time there, I think you told me before, wasn't too bad. You thought it was okay, from what I remember.
The time there?
Yeah, it went okay.
Oh yeah. I mean,
because you get very. Did you get very lonely for your family and find, oh, what the hell? What's all this about?
Sort of, but then at boarding school at that stage, you just we were all lonely, I guess.
Yeah.
But we were too busy.
Yeah.
Playing sport, marbles, climbing the nut tree, getting
into trouble. Yeah. And you would have been the only boy from the Solomon Islands. Yes. Yeah. It
was one other boy from Fiji.
Okay.
But he wasn't Indigenous, so he was a white guy.
Okay. Righto. So then the next port of call for you was Downlands College?
Yeah, I spent 3 years at Frenno Park.
Yep.
Without going home.
Wow.
They had to be, as you say, resilient. You just had to get on with it.
Yeah.
Again, the kindness of people. There were people who who took me home for holidays. There was a friend.
Okay.
One of those was the cousin of my wife, what is now my wife Michelle, and that's how I met Michelle.
Oh, really?
And another one was a family from Wandon who came from a 10,000 acre property. There were a lot of country boys there, obviously.
Yeah, and you seemed to get along quite well with them.
And they were all very kind.
Oh, excellent. That's great. So, Michael, you're telling me about your moving into Downlands College. You'd been 3 years, I think, with the Sacred Heart nuns at, was it Frenno Pines? So how did you go with Downlands? What were your years like at Downlands College, and what did you do in terms of sports? And
well, Downlands, Frenno Park was like a feeder school into Downlands.
Yeah.
Which is run. Frenno Park was Our Lady of the Sacred Heart nuns. Downlands was the Sacred Heart priests, and it was a feeder. So in Frenno Park's heyday, a lot of the boys moved straight on to either Downlands or a lot to Christian Brothers.
Oh, righto.
Downlands was boarding school. It was quite funny, really, because I was quite a bit older for my class. I did the whole of my primary school in 3 years.
Oh, righto.
So they bounced me up to Downlands, grade 7.
Wow.
So I think I started in grade 2 and was in grade 7 by 3 years later.
You must have been very smart.
I was a bit older. Yeah. It was interesting. I missed out on a lot of things.
Yeah.
But the basic grounding in arithmetic, for example.
Yeah.
But Downlands was, I thought it was a lovely school. I loved my time there. The priests were very good. And they were all part of, I guess, my attitudes in later life, because they were all hard driving men in some ways. Irish, to footballers.
Yes.
In their day, cricketers, sportsmen, sort of like, in a way, like Archbishop Pell, was a major sportsman in his day.
Yes.
Well, there were a few at Downlands like that, like Tyson Donnelly, Father Graham. They were footballers and cricketers.
Yeah.
In their own right.
I think there's Tyson House in Downlands now.
Yes.
Like they're famous characters. So,
there was a lot of the competitiveness was there and excellence. Academically, it was also very good. The pastoral care was excellent. We thought the food was dreadful, but I think it was. I guess as growing boys, you probably never had. There'll never be anything like Mum's cooking.
You compared it with the Army Chow, I suppose, or Army Tucker. Maybe be able to compare them. But when you look at Downlands College, obviously it was a religious school. And what were the things that you learned there? You know, obviously there's academic things. What were the, principles or codes or ethics or things that, or did you learn any of those things there? And also, in talking about that, some people will, have that reputation. They talk about Christian Brothers schools or Marist schools, and the priests could be, or the brothers could be quite cruel. Those you get that reputational thing, or there's been a lot of scandals with the way they treated, some of the boys with pedophilia, so forth. So, can you just touch on those ideas? I mean,
yes. I don't think I ever saw anything other than the best care that they had for their charges, for their students. They were hard, no compromise in their Christian values, but I don't think they were cruel. They certainly used the strap was standard, but that was probably standard across society. Every school had the strap, and getting 6 across the hand, or just even 2 across the hand with the lino strap for not making your bed of a morning.
Good training for the army.
That was pretty. I think, or 6, or 2 or 3 across the backside for not doing your homework.
So did you make the bed and do your homework after that?
Absolutely. I never forgot to make my bed, and I never forgot. Certainly with Mr. Sazolka, the teacher in question. My homework was always on time. You only had to do it once for me.
Yeah, I remember getting the cane, and I can still feel what it was like. And I mean, it really stung.
I felt it was one that was a bit cruel, a bit too hard. We were just mucking up.
Yeah.
After lights out, I got caught up in it. I wasn't one of the culprits.
Yeah.
But it's a lesson in life in a way. My dad used to talk about such things. Even the police in the melee or something, they'll just grab everyone and hoist you into the wagon.
You happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
At the wrong time. And the saying in the army later on was, never be a witness. If you see something happening, get out of it, because you'll get all wrapped up. And that's what happened then.
Yeah.
I ended up getting 3 across the backside with the cane. It really, really hurt.
Yeah.
Because I was innocent, actually. And
I thought they hurt more. But I do think that I'm not saying I'm an advocate for corporal punishment, but I remember I played up at school in Ireland when I was growing up, and I got caned. I got 6 on my hand with the cane,
that'd be a bit hard.
And it stung. I still feel it, but it was also a bit not humiliating, but it kind of took you down a peg or two and taught a bit of humility. And you don't forget them and you don't mess up afterwards. It's interesting. It's not like getting told off or there, Mark, don't be a naughty boy. It's, wow, okay, this is life. It's a life lesson, and if you mess up, something's going to bite you.
Yeah. You've talked about lessons. One that comes to mind. I mean, we had to go to church almost every morning, Sundays. But I actually remember 2 sermons in particular. You normally sleep through sermons. But I remember
you have to go to church to get to do that, Michael.
Yeah. But I do remember one where the lesson really was going that extra yard.
Yeah.
And it was Father Carroll. It was about talking. It was talking about really you get a job to do or something like that, or just picking up rubbish. And you're a prefect, you're a whatever, and then you say to yourself, he used to say, "What else can I do?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a little bit more I can do with this job, or what else can I do to participate? And that's always a good attitude to have. Don't just do your bit and stop.
Yeah.
Go that extra yard. Another one was Father Scrivener. I still remember his little homily. And In fact, he had two I remember from him. He was talking about self-praise.
Okay.
I still remember his hand going over the back, patting himself on the back. And sort of.
Yeah.
So what the lesson there was sort of, don't be too full of yourself.
Yeah.
And another one from his, we used to have movies.
Okay.
On a Friday. Saturday night for seniors would have two. That you'd have a major movie and a support feature, similar to.
Yeah.
And the juniors would just get the support feature on it. And some of them were be romantic scenes with Doris Day and Rock Hudson or something like that.
I know. Giving you ideas.
A bit titillating and we'd snicker. And lo and behold, we received this thunderous sermon from Father Scrivener on Sunday morning mass about tittering and...
Okay, he was on to you. Yeah.
What did he think boys were going to do? 16, 17.
Well, boys at that
when
age.
The sex scene came on.
So...
and they were two good lessons. I think they're always stick with me.
So tell me about getting involved in rugby and also the cadets at Downlands.
Well, they were two big... Well, apart from, as well as the academics, sport was an essential part of life at Downlands, and it was probably essential is to keep your sweaty, developing boys, keep them occupied.
Yeah.
But also it's part of your Christian type thing, I suppose, or a young person, a healthy body, healthy minds, fitness is a good thing. Yeah. And cricket, swimming, basketball, anything sporting wise, and rugby was my thing. We all played cricket as well, but I wasn't as good at that. And I just loved the rugby.
Played scrum half?
I used to be the hooker at Freno Park because I was the smallest, and I hated that.
Full on scrum at the age of 9 or something back in the day.
I never played anything like that in my life, but I decided when I went to Downlands I'd try for halfback because I was the smallest.
Yeah, and you played in senior rugby. I think you got on the first team or got in the seconds. You did pretty well.
I could never. I was just too small. And it's one of those things where there's always another bloke a little bit better than you.
Just a little bit.
But I was on his tail the whole.
You kept him
from grade 7 up to grade 12.
You kept him honest.
I was on his. One cock up on his part, and I was going to.
You were there. So tell me about the Army Cadets. I mean, that's something that was very common in Australian schools around that era, 19...
Yes, well, it was actually part of the defence system, the Defence Act.
Yeah.
The school cadets was very much part of it.
I think...
fully supported, fully military.
Probably 8 years ago or so, they stopped the cadets in Downlands.
Yeah.
Which is, it had a lot of tradition there, but you were telling...
Grammar still got it, but I think Downlands doesn't have it.
You were telling me about it that, it sounded like it was pretty good. You'd get to go out to the range and shoot Bren guns and 303s. And it sounded like it was good.
If you like that sort of thing. It was compulsory from grade 9 to grade 12. It was compulsory.
Wow. Could you imagine that nowadays? There could be a few conscientious objectors, I think.
Well, they did. Later on, I found out I went back to Downlands for a passing out parade, and they told me they did have a conscientious objectors platoon. Yeah,
and they had to do James, my son, he's been at Downlands. They had to do some steps or stairs.
Stairs, it was their job. While the cadets was on the conscientious, the conchies had to go and do the paving all around where the area of the library, I think.
Yeah.
Somewhere like that. But it was a full-on... It was very big in Queensland, big camps in Greenbank and Waikol.
Yeah, I've met other people that, they talked about their period, the time going down to Greenbank, and they loved it. They got to shoot machine guns on the range. And
you learnt things. You learnt leadership courses. You went and did a promotion course for corporal or sergeant or whatever, and you learnt how to give,
So did you make a NCO rank or whatever there?
Oh, yeah, I was a corporal, and I ended up being the RSM of the unit.
RSM? Did you have the Sam Brown belt and everything?
Yeah, well, I didn't have Sam Browns for us, but I had a pay stick.
You had the pay stick. I hope you used it appropriately.
A small one. But that developed my interest in the Army as a role.
Yeah. So then...
I sort of had that... Some people want to be know from a young age they want to be a doctor or a lawyer. Some don't know what they want to do.
Yeah.
I always knew I wanted to do some sort of thing like that.
Yeah. So, tell me about your. You decided to apply for the Australian Army as a officer entrant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or to become an officer?
I wasn't a citizen. I wasn't a citizen at that time. And obviously, you can only be a citizen to join to the army. You had to be a citizen. I was sort of interested in under the British system in the colonies. You've got things like police or paramilitary, armed constabulary type police.
Yeah.
I was interested in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
District officers.
Yeah.
New Guinea had the KIAPs, for example.
Okay.
And they had police supporting them. They were not regular police like we would know them, but they were armed constabulary.
Yeah, so that got your interest.
That was my interest. You could see them around the Solomons working.
Okay.
The armed, in case it might interest you, the armed constabulary concept was the British thing that they first applied and discovered in Ireland.
Yeah, a lot of trouble to deal with there, I think, with the natives.
The special branch, by the way, the special branch idea was formed, it came up in Ireland.
Yeah.
And then they used that in the colonies.
Yeah.
That worked. But one day, when I was at the cadet camp in Greenbank, one of the regular army staff captain came up to me and said, "I've been watching you," as I was the RSM, I was watching you around the camp. And that your teachers tell me you're doing well in your studies and you'll probably pass.
Oh, yeah.
He said, "Have you considered going to Duntroon, the Royal Military College?" And I knew two other friends had got scholarships to go there.
Okay.
Grade 11. And that's when that was 1970. Yes. And that gave me the idea, and I looked up Duntroon and got brochures.
Yeah.
But I had to get over this citizenship thing.
Oh, right. Obviously, Vietnam was on at the time as well.
Yes.
And there's a lot of objections to anti-war sentiment. And
I remember I talked to the teachers, and the training was excellent, 4 years. It also gave you a degree.
Yeah.
And one of the teachers said to me, "What are you looking at?" And I said, "I looked at they said, "I'm just looking at the Duntroon." I said, it happened to come to the wages page, the salaries, and the salaries you were getting after you graduated were very good. He said it was very, very good. Remember that? He said, "That's almost what I'm getting now."
Yeah.
It's only $5,000 a year back then, but that was the teacher's salary.
Yeah.
I remember that. And so, what do I do? So I applied.
How'd you get on with the citizenship thing?
I'm not quite sure. I've discovered recently.
You're probably a foreign alien or something still.
Still, to have a file, I can actually access my file.
Can?
On
ASIO, is it?
Yeah, my immigration file. So I'm going to buy it and I'll tell you about it.
You should be here
to access it. But it's there.
Be careful what you wish for. Don't open any Pandora's box. It's nice to go shooting with you. I don't want to miss you.
I did that. So I applied for Duntroon, I regardless of not being a citizen. I'm not quite sure why they even accepted my application, but I ended up going through the full selection process in Brisbane and everything, and I passed, and they accepted me. Pending two things. Pending, that was a standard thing. You had to have a certain number of points on your tertiary entrance.
Yeah.
And the second part was, in my particular case, the first one was everybody had to pass the tertiary to the satisfaction of the University of New South Wales. And the second part was my citizenship in my particular case.
Yeah.
So I went back to the Solomons after, when you finished school,
Okay.
went back. The results came out. I got a telegram from one of my mates saying, "Yes, you've got your
Oh,
tertiary."
nice.
So
And then your mother got upset. She's thinking, "Oh no, you're not going to be a soldier."
Because I also had a scholarship to. While I was there. I had an interview with the British administration because they were awarding scholarships.
Okay.
To the University of the South Pacific in Fiji or New Guinea.
Wow.
And I had a scholarship to do law.
All right.
So I told my mother, no, I want to join the army. So she ran out of the room and
Cried.
I found her under the water tank where she does her washing. She washed by hand.
Yeah, no washing machine.
No washing machine. I don't want you to go to Vietnam. She says, I don't want you to go there. Come back with. I've seen what a war can do. Don't
At close quarters, and then you'd only come back basically after being away for how many years? Like in the time you're at school from the age of 8 to 17.
Probably came home about 4 times. When I was down there, I came home only every 3 years.
Wow. So she didn't see much of you, and then you get back and next thing you say, oh yeah, I'm ready to join the army. Great. And there's a war on at the time in Vietnam and the Aussies are involved.
So anyway, I told the British administration I wouldn't be taking up the scholarship for law to go to Fiji. And I wrote to the army and said I passed.
Yep.
So they sent me a ticket. So I went back to Brisbane. I stayed with a friend, a school friend.
Yep.
And then I went and I had $10 in my pocket when I left Munda. My father gave me $10. The army told you not to bring, in the joining instructions, told you not to bring many clothes anyway. So I didn't.
You get your kit.
Because you get your kit and you grow too big when you're through training.
Oh, right.
And I remember going through the immigration process because I got that done. And then as soon as I got that done, I pulled out my certificate. In fact, it was on the 2nd of January. I signed it.
Oh, it's only...
2nd of February, I signed it. And on the 4th of February, 2nd of Feb, 2 days later, 4th of Feb, I signed into the army.
And there you go, in the army. All right, Michael, it's 4th of February. You've joined the Australian Army. You're in. You arrive at, was it Duntroon? And so tell me a little bit about your first days in the army and what you really learned from your time in the Australian Army, because you're in it for quite a few years, I believe.
Yeah, I was in for 22 years and 4 days.
Righto.
I remember my first day at Duntroon, up to lunchtime anyway, because I was 4 weeks late, about 2 weeks late. Sorry.
Yeah.
In fact, we're having a reunion down in Brisbane on the 15th of this month, which is all the Brisbane boys enlisted on the 15th of January 1970, so it's the 50th anniversary.
Wow.
And so we're going down for that, and I was 2 weeks just after them.
Wow.
I caught the aeroplane down. I was met by the bus, a driver, taken into the headquarters at Duntroon, a madhouse, allocated to a room, a company, got some gear, my uniforms, got your issues. I was taken up to lunch.
Did you get a haircut?
Yes. No, I already had I didn't need one.
You're tidy.
Anyway, I was taken into the cadets' dining room and sat down with others in my platoon. And I didn't know until 10 years later when one of them told me when I sat down there, they thought I was the new steward.
Right on.
But lo and behold, I wasn't. I was to be one of their new comrades. And then I remember having to go to the drill. A fellow called Tony Casey, I remember, he was from Downlands, same class, we were good friends, and we were also in cadets. He came across and met me at my...
Oh, nice.
And we were getting ready for drill.
Oh, right.
I still remember him there telling me what to do. You do this, you do that.
That's important to get that help.
But luckily I was already in cadets, and he said, it's just like the cadets.
Same drill.
Same drill, he said, except that the SLR rifle has a pistol grip and not through the trigger guard. And otherwise, all the drills are the same. So, thank goodness.
Yeah.
So the drill, I remember the drill instructor, Sergeant Flewell Smith, saying, "Oh, you've done this before." I just in cadets, sir. I said, "Okay," but I was able to fit in straight away on the program. And interestingly, that same drill sergeant, 22 years later, we were doing in Armidale what they call a resettlement program, because when you at least 20 years you do, the Army pays for 3 or 4 days resettlement training where they bring in a counsellor and explain. He was on it.
Oh, really?
He was doing his retirement.
Wow.
He had put on a lot of weight.
Yeah?
But he was the same guy.
God.
I said, my God, I don't know if he remembered me really, but...
And what about the guy you'd say, the Scottish guy that said, "Grit and determination, Mr. Wheatley"?
Yeah, well, there was a couple of guys. One of them, it was, in particular, it was the RSM at Portsea, Officer Cadet School.
Okay.
when I ended up there, which is another story I'll come back to. But and also one of the PTIs. And it was not an uncommon
Physical
saying.
training instructor, PTI?
Physical training instructor,
Yeah, okay.
But it was one of those things that was common in your mind, or people, whenever you're doing route marches or 5-mile runs in full pack and rifle.
Okay.
And pain.
Yeah.
The pain in the blood in your boots and
so it's not just a story. You do actually get blisters
chafing between the cheeks of your backside, but your gear hurts and your shoulders. But you've just got to grin and grit and determination what was the saying.
Yeah.
Harden up.
Well, I think you're never going to survive. Australian Army's got a good, always had a great tradition, great reputation. There's been some damage lately with the Brereton report, which is we might get a chance to talk about that later. But I suppose the success of Australian military forces was in a large part due to the quality of the training and the preparedness of the men and the women when they were posted elsewhere. So you served your time in the Royal Australian Rifles. You were an infantryman?
Yep. Royal Australian Regiment.
Royal Australian Regiment, sorry. Yeah. Can you please tell us about your experience overseas? I believe you served some time in Uganda. And the Torres Strait, working with the people in the Torres Strait to form a military unit. That's pretty interesting. So just a little synopsis on those.
I guess there were two highlights. So there's probably a third. When I was still first one was as a lieutenant with a platoon of 30 men in my first year of after graduate. We went for 4 months, deployed to the Air Force to Butterworth Air Force Base
in Malaysia.
Okay. Which was for protection, for duties associated with protection of Australian lives and assets, because we had a squadron of Mirages there.
Okay.
There was also the Chinese terrorist threat was still ongoing with Chinpeng. That was still ongoing.
In Malaysia, Indonesia, at that time they were.
No, not Indonesia. It was their own internal terrorist problem. So our duties were protection of the base and the aircraft. That was, and I was only 21 then. So that was an interesting. We were all 21.
Yeah, hopefully you had a good sergeant helping you there.
Yeah, well, he was probably the oldest.
Yeah.
And then Uganda. I don't know how many were the people. If you remember Idi Amin.
Yes.
Well, he was before him was Uganda became independent from Britain in the mid '60s.
Yeah.
Milton Obote.
Yeah.
Amin took over.
Yeah.
And then Obote took back over. There was a bush war for a while.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a mess with the assistance. It was a bush war with the assistance of Tanzanian troops, I think it was, that overthrew Amin.
Okay.
So in that interim period, the Commonwealth, and it was the Commonwealth Secretary General Sir Sunny Sridhar Ramphal, after a Commonwealth meeting in New Delhi, I believe it was, decided to put together a Commonwealth team of servicemen to assist Uganda try and transition out of its dark ages, as it were.
Right.
There were 21 in total. Britain and Australia carried the majority. We had the seven instructors, so we had the majority of the operational people.
Yeah.
Places like Guyana, Sierra Leone, Canada, one doctor, a couple of medics.
They all supplied people.
Yeah, but they were ones and twos.
Yeah.
It was headed up by a British colonel.
So tell me about the time you were out in the bush and your NCO was with you and you knocked them off the jeep.
Oh, so yeah.
That was
because I'd only just joined. My particular function was to a place called Kabamba, which was a military, they called it a battle school or training camp in the middle of the bush, middle of nowhere. Had been built by the Israelis who'd been kicked out, but our job was training groups of 100 of the Ugandan National Liberation Army would come and roll through us. And there was two of us, myself and a sergeant. And to supplement our hard rations, which is just combat, you're familiar with, we'd been given a shotgun, an automatic semi-auto shotgun, beautiful Browning shotgun.
A5 Browning.
and the trick was one would drive, he'd sit on the wheel well on front of the Land Rover on top of the spare wheel, and we'd crawl up along this road after training, and the Franklin, a little bird,
Okay.
and a guinea fowl.
Yeah.
And the idea was when you saw one, you'd drive up fast and get to this there was a zone before they'd fly off, and then you put your brakes on. Well, I put the brakes on. It was too hard, and he just flew off. All I could see was his backside.
What did he say when he got up?
All I could see coming back up the side with a red face is effing officers.
You're the new guy.
Supposed to ease.
Yeah, you're the new guy.
To stop.
Did he have a safety belt on?
I thought you had a safety belt on.
That
was Dave Siggers.
Oh God!
But I got it right after that.
You got it right. It's highly important. Supplement the rations. The other speaking of supplementing rations, tell me the story about you're out doing training and a guy gets grabbed by a snake. Oh, was it only a little snake, wasn't it?
It was a huge snake.
Like we're talking about,
It was 13 paces long. It took about 9 people to hold it up like
so
that.
You're talking 12 meters, 11 meters long.
Yeah.
I've seen a photograph.
Yeah. Well, 30 on the pistol range. 15 paces for me is 15 paces is 12 and a half, just 12 meters.
Yeah. So a 12-meter snake.
Yeah.
So the guy's was he crawling or just walking? And
no, we were practicing drills in the tall grass. Tall grass everywhere, and it was down up, crawl, roll, aim, fire. Next group. Typical. And so one of the soldiers throws himself down on the ground in the grass because it was his turn to go to ground, and he lay across the snake, which was just sunning itself. So it reacted and curled around. Yeah. And they tell me it grabs onto his hip. It's not a poisonous.
Well, he's got big serrated fangs
type thing.
Yeah.
But it wraps up and crushes it. And the instructor, Ugandan instructor I was down another part of the hill.
He was the only one with ammo.
He was the one carrying ammo because they've got no ammo, just blanks.
Yeah.
But the instructors carry full.
Yeah.
Because it was an operational area as well.
Yeah.
So he pulled out took about 4 rounds to stop moving.
Yeah.
to break the snake's back.
Wow.
4 shots.
Poor guy must have been a bit upset. But then
I asked him how he was, and he said, "Sir, I was very scared, sir."
And then they were all really happy because did they take the snake off for food or something? Did you say?
Yeah, we skinned it. The British, there's no British fellow there, officer. He was a hunter. He skinned it, and he was going to get it home, but the food it was then eaten. But the next day, there's a water point, little dam, and there's a couple of concrete tanks. The women came down to get their water, which is quite close to where this snake incident happened. Yeah. And there was another snake, a smaller one, had eaten a baby goat, a kid.
What?
So he was trying to get back under the hole, and there was a big lump in them.
Oh, right.
It couldn't get.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't get the lump through back into his hide. So the women came down to get their water and do their washing. They said, "Oh yeah," so they will beat it to death and ate it.
Yeah. Did you taste it?
It must have been a family.
Did you ever taste the snake?
No.
You didn't chance it?
I didn't try it. No, I went back to my guinea fowl.
Called the sergeant. We're going hunting guinea fowl.
But that was interesting.
But it was obviously, from what you described, it was an area where there still were some nasty characters around. You still had to be armed, ready to go in case you.
Well, it was a bush war between Milton Obote and Muzare Yoweri Musini. I'm still not pronouncing his name right, but he was the rebel.
Yeah.
And but they had promised not to attack any Commonwealth Forces people if we did, on condition that we did not engage in any full operational matters. We could get on with the training, but we had not to go into the field.
Yeah.
With the so we did that.
Yeah.
There were North Koreans there too training. Not at my camp. They participated in some operations as instructors.
Training the Ugandan National Liberation Army.
Same people.
So did you come across the North Koreans at all?
They got taken out.
Yeah?
They got grenades thrown into several incidents where somebody would come by on a bicycle and throw the hand grenade into their vehicle. So
Yeah. Stay out of it.
Stay out of it. Do the training, yes, but don't involve in the field. So.
Yeah.
Just to finish that, as we pulled out, we finished our mission. I was the last rotation. I think there were 4 6-month rotations.
So how many long were you there for? 6 months?
4 months. It's supposed to be 6 months, but then they cut it short.
Okay.
It was about 2 years. It shared around the different battalions in the regiment, and as we pulled out, it started ramping right up.
Yeah.
Museveni had started pushing.
Yep.
And he took shortly after we withdrew, he took over the country in Obote.
Deposed.
It was deposed. That was in 1983, January, February, 84. And we're back in Australia by then. And he's been in power ever since.
And you're saying that some people reckon...
Our major wrote to him, I believe,
really?
Jack Roberts, and said, sorry, we were on the wrong side. Because we were actually on the wrong side.
Yeah, you did tell me that Milton Obote was just as cruel as Idi Amin, who's got a terrible reputation, but some of the local people...
That was the opinion, yes.
Some of the locals said he was worse.
Yes.
Which is remarkable, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's your time in Uganda. The next one was the Torres Strait. Do you just pretty happy there? Nice posting.
Oh, it was.
You got some good results with developing a local unit there, like a reservist unit.
Yes, it was probably the highlight of my time in the army.
Yeah. Was that fishing for crayfish was the best thing of it, or the coral trout, or?
Well, it was. To explain, Australia has the army has 3 regiments across the north called regional force surveillance units. Yep. They started about 1980. The first one was the Northwest Mobile Force, which is North Force in Darwin. There's the Pilbara Regiment, and then based at Port Hedland, and then the 51st Battalion Far North Queensland Regiment. So you have a network from Port Hedland, right, and in my time, I believe, Port Hedland all along the coastline, all the way to Cardwell.
Yeah.
It's and inland as well. So the last 2 gaps were the Torres Strait, which was the company. I was then required to raise a company for surveillance duties from the Jardine River north to both our borders.
Yeah.
And then the other gap was another fellow who had to raise a company around Mount Isa up to Burrawula.
Oh, right.
And cover the Gulf.
Yeah. So
it's not necessarily designed that way, but mostly they are Indigenous people because by nature of the demographics.
Yes.
If in Weipa there's a lot of miners, the white guys, miners.
Yeah.
In Cairns, they're mostly white guys.
Yeah.
And on Thursday Island, we race Torres Strait. Mostly Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders. So
okay.
We raised 19 patrols from each of the communities.
Yeah.
And the role was to conduct reconnaissance and surveillance operations.
A lot of it was forming a unit, training a unit, selecting the people, and I think there was some skepticism about the unit and how they'd perform. But I think you told me that in large exercises, they did really well, and you're very, very proud of what your guys did.
Yes. They were, it was in some ways, it was an unknown quantity what results we would get.
Yeah.
It was new territory for a lot of the army, for a lot of the train. It was new territory for the guys. Some of them had been in the army because there was a special conditions unit called the 49th, called 49 Battalion, which is a special conditions unit.
Okay.
They would go to camp once a year.
Yeah.
And then just go back to their islands and so on. But the attitude I took was that we had to find. I had to look for. What's the word? Motivators, if you like. One of the motivators was to enthuse people was the Torres Strait Light Infantry Battalion, for example. During the first, people were very proud of their performance.
Yeah. So, Michael, it sounds like it was a great success developing that unit there in the Torres Strait. I suppose you will always find the skeptics who'll say, "Oh, they're Indigenous guys or Aboriginal guys. They won't be really interested. They're more interested in playing football or, go and walk about." But tell me about what you said to the guys to try and explain to them that they were under the microscope and there were skeptics out there. Just what was it that you said to them to frame that up?
Well, I drew on the pride that they had in the Torres Strait Light Infantry, which was a World War II battalion raised, based around the Torres Strait Islanders. And they did a lot of good work in Horn Island, Thursday Island. They never deployed overseas, but they defended. But the main thing is that people had pride in that history.
Yeah.
So history is important.
Yeah.
And so I used that. They also had Torres Strait Islanders in particular. Some of them, Murray Islanders, for example, have a proud warrior history or ethic as back in their pre-colonial days and colonial days.
Yeah.
And
what did you say to them? There was an address that you made to them and said, "Look."
Just talk, maybe not an address as a whole group, as I moved around, and I would speak to them in their different. We just had something to prove.
Yeah, you're being watched.
We're being watched.
Yeah.
And as Torres Strait Islanders and Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders from the Northern Peninsula area, there's a lot of investment because we're also building depots.
Yeah.
A lot of equipment, boats, and a lot of expectation and defence of Australia.
Yeah.
And they rose to that. But one of the primary ways I also did it was because the brigade used to have a military skills competition, which is like a mini Olympics in all the different.
Yeah.
They'd go for a week, and previously, when I'd been in the brigade headquarters, they brought the Islanders down, even when they weren't a company then, but they would fly down at the last minute, and they would lose.
Oh, right,
Because they'd just been travelling, they hadn't trained as a group, they hadn't done anything, and it's like throwing a football team together and then going to play a grand final.
So you changed that.
It was so. I said to the Sergeant Major, "We've got to change that. Winners are grinners."
Yep.
So what I did, I put them into a secret training camp with the 1st Battalion Royal Australian Regiment in Townsville for 2 weeks.
You might have had some connections there.
And they trained.
Yeah.
For full 2 weeks beforehand, and we came out, went to across the other side of Townsville at Jazeen Barracks where it's being held, and we thrashed them.
Wow. How good was that?
We won.
How good was that?
We won every single trophy, and we had the bugle, which was the prize trophy, and their pride. People, and winners are grinners.
Yeah.
And everybody, basically people said, "Who are these people?"
Good on you.
And I did that for the next 3 years in a row, and we won every year.
Wow, that's so good.
People just said, "How do we beat these people?" So we set the standard. And that translated into the whole...
So they were up against, like, people from Townsville?
The other battalions in the brigade, 42nd, mainly around Rockhampton.
Or
31st Battalion. No, Army Reserve.
Okay.
So the whole of the Army Reserve in North Queensland, the 11th Brigade, would be in this competition. And our Torres Strait and Northern Peninsula won it every time.
Winners are grinners. And obviously, nowadays we have, everyone's a winner at school, and you have this sort of thing, we don't want to make it too competitive. But I
also did it to show the guys what life in a regiment, in a full... By working in the... we used to do all our training in the bush, so that we'd sort of say that this is what the army's like.
Yeah.
But when you took them down to Townsville, into the regular battalion environment, they would see what a regular battalion looked like.
Yeah.
How they marched, how they moved around, how they built, and it changed their perspective.
Wow. That's fantastic. And it's
I taught them some things. If I can tell you one anecdote, they didn't know Corporal Tamu, apparently, Lance Corporal, I'll use his name, came through in the mess line, and you're supposed to just take a few. There's a full choice of food there, and you just take a bit. Well, he started there and took
cleaned up
everything.
Yeah.
And they worked with the reconnaissance platoon.
Okay.
But it also engendered great relationships between the Torres Strait boys and and the regular soldiers.
Yeah.
And eventually we got the corporals under instruction to teach, to be instructors of their own.
Yes.
Great pride in that.
Oh, great.
And we even, one of the last courses we did before I left was that we had a recruit course ourselves at Bamaga, and the white guys from Cairns came up.
Oh, really?
And the instructors, half the instructors were Aboriginals or Torres Strait Islanders.
Wow.
And just the interaction between the group. And guys would be saying at the, when we have a break, you come up to my island. You know, he's talking to white guys.
Oh, yeah.
Aboriginal guys would be talking. So, come on up, you have a break, you come up, I'll look after you, I'll take you fishing.
Yeah, the fishing would be good. I think you said when you arrived there that they, you seen these crayfish or something, and they said, "Oh, that's just for bait."
That's it.
So the fishing would have been amazing. So
the fishing
I think
was
that's
so good. The fishing was, if I may, the fishing was so good you had to bait your hook behind a tree.
They come look. So anyway, Michael, that probably takes us to a spot where we've covered off on your military career. Obviously, just touched on so many things. But what we do now is we move on to your. You left the army. You had a bit of a hiatus period, and then you got recruited or tapped on the shoulder, given your connection to the Solomon Islands. Your family obviously had a good reputation, and you got tapped on the shoulder to help the Solomons Police with some significant unrest in the island at the time between two groups, one on Guadalcanal and one from Melita, I think.
Yes.
But I'll leave that to you to explain to me. Just if you can just give me a brief explanation of the situation, and then your recruitment, and you became an assistant commissioner over there with, I think, like 150 people under you, I think. So it was quite a responsible, quite a lot of responsibility for you, and a very difficult situation, because the thing was like a powder keg that was just ready to just explode, and you had to manage some of your men from one side, some of your men were from the other side. So if you just give us a synopsis of that and what you learned from it.
The scenario is that the Bougainville insurrection had been going for a while, I think about 89 or 90.
Yeah.
I'd left the army in February 93, and I was tapped on the shoulder by 95. So the Bougainville Revolutionary Army were the insurrectionists, I suppose, and the Papua New Guinea Defence on that side. And Bougainville, the southern end of Bougainville, and it's just a chain of islands into the Solomons.
Yeah.
But the border is an accident of colonial history, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's visual distance across.
Yeah. But are they different, like completely different people, or are they sharing a lot?
They're all related.
Okay, righto. It's just
So, but whenever the PNG, there were what they called it the spillover effects.
Okay.
The revolutionaries would, the BRA would run across the border to hide. They'd come across to get medical aid or food or whatever, and there would be hot pursuit by the PNG Defence Forces or their proxies, what they call the resistance. Mm-hmm. They did even killings. There was a killing on Kamalii before my time.
And attacking people in the villages in the Solomons.
Yes, they did that later on, yeah. But that had settled down a bit, and they wanted to take the what they call the police field force. This is the armed constabulary component left over from the British. It used to be called the mobile force, but it was the police field force.
Yeah.
And they also had a police surveillance unit with patrol boats donated by Australia, which was for fishery surveillance. But they were mostly used at the border at that stage, because they had manned 50 calibre machine guns.
Righto.
A crew of 20 or so.
Okay.
50 calibre machine guns. So the police, when this all blew up at the border, the Solomon Islands wasn't trained for it. They were just all. So they hired a couple of an ex-Australian Army guy and an ex-SAS guy from England to train the Solomon Islands at the border and set up a surveillance line.
Okay.
And it settled out. And eventually I went there on a holiday and I got tapped on the shoulder and said, "Do you want a job?" So I eventually took it on after some negotiations, and they wanted to change the direction slightly to a national, what they call the National Reconnaissance and Surveillance Force, to not only just do the border but do surveillance across the country, which was an essential task. And it was actually the same job what I was doing in the Torres Strait.
Oh, true, yeah.
So it was an ideal fit, and it wasn't a military organisation. I was clear on that.
Yeah.
But then while I was trying to get into that job in '95, I joined in early '95. Then by June, July, there's a lot of administrative problems with the unit. People hadn't been paid for a long time.
Oh my goodness.
Properly, pay scales. So it's not an uncommon problem in some places like the Solomons and throughout the public service. But it suddenly blew up again because the PNG DF had increased its tempo of operations on the other side, and whenever they did that, it would spill over.
Yeah.
And there were hot pursuit operations.
Yeah.
And this went on for a year or so.
Yeah.
Where the posts that we had established along the border were being attacked. We even had one ship-to-ship naval engagement.
Yeah, you told me about that.
Which is not well known, but it's probably the only ship-to-ship naval engagement in the whole of the Pacific post-World War.
250 rounds, is that the one?
About 200, yeah, I'm told.
50 cal.
Two containers of ammo, 50 cal.
They created a few little holes in the.
And there were also grenade attacks on one village. Another village got machine gunned because they believed the village was supporting one of the BRA wanted men.
Okay.
And they were also fired their cannons, their
artillery.
The gun's main arm, what is it? It's a 75mm gun, main gun.
Yeah.
Into the coconut trees.
Oh, right on.
On the corner of the village. So there were some very serious incursions.
Yeah. But they did end up containing it. They performed pretty well. The
boys performed very well. We were at pains because we could never win it, and we were too small. We only had 120 or 130 men, as you mentioned earlier. The PNG Defence Force is about two battalions at least.
Yeah. So
we had to fight it in a different way.
And you had to keep the high moral ground.
Yeah, we're just a
small little nation trying to protect ourselves.
And depend on the diplomatic community like Australia and New Zealand.
Try and control
the United States to put pressure on the other side.
Yeah.
And we had several border meetings with the military commanders, and even at Port Moresby.
That was trying to working on a border war. Yeah. Then the civil war ended a bit.
And Guadalcanal.
When did that happen? Time frame like this?
97.
So and we're talking 4 years later, is it?
Yeah, 97.
And you're still there?
No, it's been settled. When Australia came in with the regional.
So you had left by that stage, and then the next thing was
So that segued. The border problem segued into at that end of the country, at the border, and then at the other end of the country, it blew up with the Guadalcanal people.
But that just sort of started happening, and then you left. Is that right?
No, I was in amongst it for about 2 years.
Oh, you're in it for 2 years.
At the same time. So at one stage, I remember there was one of the worst incidents. There was a machine gun attack going on one of my posts at Moley, and I was on the radio. The fellow was called the inspector was calling for reinforcements, and on the land telephone, the inspector on the other side of Honiara was calling for reinforcements. So I had them both like that. So I had two attacks going on at the same time. So I just went like that on the telephone.
So Honiara. So what was going on there?
It was the Guadalcanal people were started attacking the Malaytons.
Who had come into their area.
Yes, they were the settlers, or illegal settlers. Introduced.
Yeah.
Because land in the Solomons is owned by somebody.
Yeah.
And the Malaytons had drifted in.
Yeah.
Some by business and some were there properly. Some had bought land, but there were illegal settlements.
Okay.
And there was also a lot of other issues which are quite difficult to get into.
Yeah.
But in any case, it became an ethnic squabble between two tribes, and the government. It wasn't a civil war, as in against the government. It was two tribes. And then there was something had to go in the middle and try and.
There's something over a personal dispute between a person from one tribe and a person from another, and then it just escalated.
Yes.
And it kept going. So.
And that ended up in a coup.
Yeah.
On the 5th of May, 2000, where they took over the armoury.
Yeah.
Aided by some of my boys, unfortunately, the Malaytons. That was the difficulty with trying to run during a heated situation, trying to run a police force with multiple ethnicities in it.
Yeah.
That was when it got put to the test, people understandably went with their tribe.
Yeah.
So the Malaytons, Malayton boys, the Malayton Eagle Force was formed in response to the Guadalcanal Liberation Army.
Yeah.
And we were in the middle. The rest, every other tribe called themselves the neutral tribes.
Yeah.
And they managed to get hold of the armoury and all the weapons, and that was the end of it.
And that's when your
my contract had run out
by
that stage. I couldn't get it renewed because Parliament had the Public Service Commission had disbanded, and so on. I had no authority. So eventually I left.
Yeah.
At 3 or 4 months after the coup.
And then eventually the Australian government after that got involved and helped with New Zealand with them.
And later on, the Regional Assistance Mission Solomon Islands was formed with Australians sending troops.
Yeah.
Assisted by the other Forum, Pacific Island Forum countries.
Okay, so we're running out of time, unfortunately, but we've got a quick 5 minutes to just talk about you. Really haven't got a lot of time, but you also served in Sudan with a logistics operation. You were in Haiti after the really bad earthquake. I don't know what year it was, and you'd served some time in Chad. And also, when you were in Haiti, you got to meet Angelina Jolie, which is quite a thing. And you told your wife you had a new girlfriend, but she just said, "What's she reply?"
Said, "You stupid old man."
Yeah, so that's
I'm the only one. I'm the only one would have you.
You got brought back to reality quickly.
She was the UN Goodwill ambassador there on a Goodwill visit. And I had the job of putting people on aeroplanes and booking them in, and she was there. Yeah. So at the bottom of the steps, we asked if I could have a photograph taken with her. So there was a photograph. She's a very nice lady. She said yes, absolutely. Yeah. So it was part of her job.
Oh yeah, excellent.
We had a photograph session.
So Michael, just to conclude now, we've got a couple of minutes. What are the main lessons in life? What are the top 3 lessons that you learned in life? And also, what are the top 3 things that annoy you about society at the moment?
Well, probably the biggest thing is in my life is because of my experience coming from the Solomons, the way I was looked after at school, the way certain families looked after me when I was in a very vulnerable period of life as a young. That would be gratitude, to be grateful for what we have, for the society that we have.
Yeah.
The good, and along with that is the essential goodness of people.
Yeah.
Of Australia, what I call the quintessential Australian.
Yeah.
Is to me quite often people say, how to put it? I'm grateful.
Yeah.
For everything that's been given to me.
Yeah.
And only an ingrate would kick it in the teeth and disrespect it, what we have.
Yeah.
Because I've been to a number of places which really were shitholes.
Yeah.
And every time I used to come back from places like Sudan or any other place, you get to the Brisbane airport, put your photo.
You want to kiss the ground.
Welcome to Australia, says the sign, and you feel like throwing yourself on the ground and kissing
the ground. It's that good, yeah.
So, Australians are great people. It's a great society that we have, and what you mentioned, I'm losing my thread here a bit, but you said also what what annoys me about it. And we're coming into that period when Australia Day arguments come up that does annoy me.
Yeah.
And people disrespect Australia Day or the flag or that. So I can understand there are people who might think of it as Invasion Day, I suppose. But nevertheless, what we have now is what people fought for, and a lot of people from all ethnicities have come right to it.
Yeah.
And the other great thing I find in this country is that that I've learned is it doesn't matter who you are. If you work hard, if you're competitive, if you mix in, if you assimilate, if you be part of it, engage, people accept you. And that was my lesson in the army. We wore a green uniform then, not a jungle green it was called, not a camouflage one. And the saying in the regiment always was, we don't care what colour you are, there's only one colour here, son, and that is army green, baggy green skin. And that was true. And
you'd have jokes and people would call you this and you'd call them that, and you'd josh around from what you told me, but there was never you never felt excluded, you always felt included. And I think that's a great thing about Australia, in my experience as well. That
I've given advice as an officer to private soldiers who would complain about racism or that sort of thing, and I said, no, it's up to you in a way. Up to you. You be good at something.
Yeah.
Mix in. Looked around. He said, look at the best footballer we have, or the best boxer, is an Aboriginal guy.
Yeah.
Or he's a guy who's from Greece.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing in Australia. They do. You still have the concept of a fair go, and doesn't matter whether you're blue, black, or brindle. For a lot of people, they do get a go in Australia they wouldn't get in other countries, and that's been my experience as well. And I think gratitude is a very important thing to talk about, and probably brings us to a point we need to close. I'd just like to thank you very much for coming to have this chat with me. We've been all around the world, from the Solomon Islands to Chad, Sudan, getting pictures with Angelina Jolie, and when we end up with, it's a great country, Australia. Take pride in who we are, and try and stick together rather than have all this, divisiveness and identity politics. Just be, appreciate the place. Get stuck in, have a go, and don't whinge, and take responsibility. So it's so nice to talk to you, Michael. And
thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's great. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.